Hello, I'm Katie Wicks, and I have written a memoir called Delicacy, which is out at the moment. So I've decided to sit down and chat with some very interesting and talented people about some of the subjects that I write about in the book. So today I have the huge honour of interviewing Susie Orbach. Susie is a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, writer and social critic. Her seminal work, Fat as a Feminist Issue, was published in 1978 and has helped the lives of millions of women. I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm really grateful to you for speaking with me today, and also for writing Fat as a Feminist Issue, because it really saved me, and it was how I began to heal from years of disordered eating. When I talk about it, I sort of say that I'm kind of 80%, 90% on a good day recovered, and that I think it is a lifelong process. And I just wondered if you thought that that was a sort of good ambition to have, to be sort of 80% recovered from years of being trapped in sort of diet culture.
I suppose, given how disordered our culture is about food and bodies, I think it's about as good as it gets, because I think there's continual prompts and provocations to make us feel rubbish about our bodies and scared of what we're eating. So it's as though we've got a broken leg. We've healed it, but there's always going to be, oh, I better watch out there. So in that sense, I'm with you. For most of the time, hopefully, you will be able to enjoy the changes your body goes through and not feel appalled by them, or made to feel appalled by them, or seduced by the latest nutritional theory, whatever the hell.
It's interesting, the times when I do feel like I'm getting pulled back into the culture, it's usually when I'm tired or premenstrual, that I sort of know now the cycle and when the sort of weak spots are. I think just being aware of...
I think awareness is part of it. Or if we think about this whole period where we haven't been able to eat out. And the fatigue that is associated with food prep. Which might be a great pleasure, at least it is for me. And then you think, nah, I can't be bothered. And then actually that not being bothered can be short-term harmful, because it's just part of something's been interrupted.
There was something quite exhausting about the level of self-care that was needed in lockdown. There were days where it just felt like almost suffocating how much I had to look after myself every day in all these small, boring ways. And I just wondered, for people who are yet to read the book and discover sort of eating intuitively, would it be okay to talk a bit about the 5 keys to this new way of eating and what they are?
The thing is, they're very simple to say.
They sound deceptively simple when you just...
But they're a little bit harder to put into practice. But they are things you can rely on and go forward to or go back to. So the first thing, which scandalised loads of people, was eat when you're hungry. What a concept.
If you've only ever known the prison or out of control, it's like so different.
That for many people is, well, what the hell is hungry? Do you wake up hungry, or do you wake up berating yourself for what you've eaten the day before and telling yourself you're not? Okay, so how do you find that signal? Just like you know how to pee or to sneeze. Those are involuntary signals. So then the next key, and it doesn't matter which order you do this, is eat what you're hungry for. So what the hell is that? Is that your mum's cooking? Is it the things you weren't allowed to eat that you used to sneak at a friend's house?
It was for me, That was the biggest one for me. The permission to eat was huge,
I mean, when I was developing this, I remember we never had cakes or anything like that in my house, unlike... And so, for me, cheesecake was just absolutely divine. And I was living in New York, and you could find really good cheesecake. And really, I'm not that interested in it anymore, but that would constitute the right response. And learning that if you eat when you're hungry, and you eat what you're hungry for, and you stay present while you're eating, actually, it feels pretty damn good.
Yeah. I think there's a bit in Fat as a Feminist Issue, you talk about that food's been given this sort of magical quality almost. And there are foods that were denied to me. I had this pull, and it was about once I was allowed to eat it, it lost its magic, and that was a really powerful process.
Yeah. So another key would be stop eating when you feel full, but you can't really do that if you haven't started when you're hungry, because if you start when you're hungry, you actually can monitor food. I don't mean in a obsessive way, but you can notice, oh, that feels right, or I might want a bit more, but I don't need to get it in because I'm not allowed to have it another time.
It's not going to be taken away. And it's also interesting that you say sort of that there's the binging, it's so little about pleasure that you don't really actually taste the food or appreciate it. You're almost trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, so that's another question is, well, if you're eating when you're not hungry, what's that about?
Yeah.
Would it be worth thinking about that? What feelings are you trying to manage? What are you trying to get away from?
And I guess it doesn't ever do the job it's trying to do for you.
Well, that's the real problem, because it replaces whatever the issue is with a problem about having eaten when you weren't hungry and having felt bad about it, and therefore feeling that you've injured yourself and that you've been a bad one. And you've got to then make a solution to that problem rather than the problem of what you might have been feeling in the first place. So you're just piling a thing, which therapists would call a defense, on top of the distress that might have prompted you, or the happiness. I mean, people don't just eat compulsively when they feel lousy. If you're eating compulsively, you'll eat compulsively whether you're feeling good or bad.
I was going to ask how the book started, and you mentioned, I found it really interesting that it was out of consciousness raising sort of groups in the 70s in New York, and I love the idea of groups of women getting together to do things like that.
How it started was there was this lovely institution called the Alternate You, and we were all learning about Marxism and feminism and colonialism, and it was really coming out of the civil rights movement and Vietnam War, and there was something on a group put together on food and women, and I thought, right, it's going to be all about the food companies and body images and it was all about that, but it was also about what's our personal story, because the women's liberation movement was founded on sharing personal stories, which then alerted you to what was going on in the culture that you had absorbed, that you were part of. You were a cultural production at the same time as you were a
personal could be political.
We just went around and talked our stories and discovered that we were all really rather frightened of our bodies and didn't like them very much, and we were scared of food, even though we would surrender and be involved in, and that's how it happened. And the person who'd called it together, Carol Munter, she said, "Oh, well, maybe we should eat when we're hungry."
Yeah. Was it a radical? Did it feel like a radical idea at the time?
It really was radical, because I was living in New York, and every other shop was a food shop, or a bit like London and cities are now.
Yeah.
But it was that time when food was being produced simply to tempt you, not to eat for strength.
Mm-hmm. And how was the book received when it was first published?
It was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it went out of print within the first week.
So all these women just quietly suffering.
And I must have had thousands of letters. People wrote letters in those days. Yeah. And we set up loads of self-help groups at the Women's Therapy Centre, and then a theatre company, Spare Tire Theatre Company, formed, and they did about 5 or 6 plays which they took around to community groups.
That's great. Do you still get letters, or I suppose emails or tweets from women today?
I do, actually, yeah. The situation is not really any better today. Yeah. In fact, I'd say it's considerably worse.
Yeah, I think it's worse. There's a lot of criticism, the idea that that wellness is the sort of new term, and that actually it can be just kind of dieting hidden.
Yeah, I think it's a cover.
And also the way that intuitive eating is now sold, like the no diet diet, like it's been slightly co-opted, but without the feminism and without the sort of political...
But I think I've kind of watched all of that, I remember when vegetarianism became a thing in the 70s and 80s, it was, for many people, of course it was a moral practice for some, but for many, it was a way of managing an eating problem. If I exclude this, that, and the other. Yeah. It's a different form of exclusion than fat or sugar or pasta or whatever. Yeah. Look, people take what they can take, and so, of course, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you can become a new diet. Yeah. Of course it can become a new diet, but the question is it a hurtful one? Probably not. That is the thing. It isn't hurtful, particularly if you actually take care to see how a food interacts with your body. But wellness is a huge industry, absolutely huge. And the sell of us as our bodies, as our product, as our calling card in the world. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of everything against what I wanted Fifi to be. Yeah, that we're sort of... Women are kind of become consumers so quickly, so young. When I first began to give up dieting, and I was at the beginning of the journey, and it was quite sort of fragile, and I think I remember saying to a GP that I didn't want to be weighed because I was worried it would just throw me back, and I just wondered if you could imagine a sort of time where you don't just get handed a diet sheet when you go to the doctors, and how that can happen. I remember doing some workshops for doctors very early on, simply saying, do you know when you're hungry? I mean, that simple question plants an idea. Or, do you know why you eat when you're not hungry? Yeah. Or, do you know what foods you actually like? Yeah. And I never know what to say in the doctor when they say, do you smoke, do you drink, how much? I mean, I just think, well, what do you want to know from me? Because health is more than just our size, I guess. Something I've been writing about in my book is the relationship between fat and consent, in a way, because I never felt as though my body was my own, which, as you say in Fifi, partly because of how dieting, we're alienated from our own bodies. But also, I guess, feelings of feeling too fat to either turn down unwanted attention, and all the accounts that women give in Fifi that you write about, of the different feelings about fatness and thinness, and that they don't know if they'll be able to handle sexual attention and all of that. I just think it's there's a relationship there that I don't read about very often. I just wondered what you thought about how we can feel our bodies are our own and stand up for them. I think it is so damn hard. Yeah. I think it's even harder than when I wrote Fifi. Yeah. Because I think girls' bodies are being destabilised, and boys actually, from so early on now, that I think the only way you can do it is collectively. It's only when you have other people that you are involved in that struggle, and you can say, I feel uptight saying no, or whatever, and then you talk to each other about it, because there is so much internalized shame. Yeah. And so much longing to feel safe in one's body and to feel recognized. I mean, I'm enraged that it takes up our heart, souls, and pounds. One of my questions actually was, I sometimes wonder why women aren't angrier about the situation in general. But it's an internalized form of misogyny, isn't it? Yeah, it's interesting as well that almost dieting does it. There's a sort of passivity that comes with it because you're so weak as well. Well, it isn't passive though, is it? It's passive, but you're being active in relation to looking after yourself, whatever the mantra is that you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. But the underlying thing that it's building is that there's something wrong with you, and that is what I think undermines. The other thing I write about a bit is just I don't think people realise just how damaging fat shaming is, and like emotionally, psychologically, like long term as well. I feel like having been fat shamed at such a young age, it's had such like devastating effects on my whole life, and I wonder why it isn't even like a crime. Like why isn't Well, I think it is becoming socially unacceptable, isn't it?
Yeah,
now,
I think
thank
it is.
God. I mean, thank goodness. I mean, the tragedy for me, when I think about that, is that you've got a whole population, really, who may look the right size, but feel terrible about their bodies and feel unsure and unstable, but they pass. And then there's a group that doesn't pass.
Yeah.
But she could pass if only she looked after herself, or she was, she's so pretty, all of that kind of So there's actually, everybody's feeling the shame, and then there's the explicit assault on, why doesn't she look after herself?
Yeah.
Why should she do that? So shameful.
Yeah.
As though you're exposing for the other person their own difficulty or their own fear they'll be on the wrong side of the tracks, or they won't be able to control themselves, or their throwing up over the toilet bowl will be exposed. It's quite I think it's a Rorschach test for those people who are doing the shaming, actually. What are they so petrified of when they see the other person?
Yeah, I sometimes think that that sometimes the reasons for people fat shaming are because I sometimes think that some women, it's almost like, well, I've been starving for so long, how dare you just let go and live your life?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And when all of those star magazines used to be around, where they'd catch a star who hadn't had 20 designers fix up how that person looked, and they showed they actually had a little bit of a body. And the joy of that was absolutely, so I thought you were like that, but you're not really.
Yeah. Or sometimes this fake concern for someone's health, I think, can definitely sometimes be just,
Whereas the going up and down the scale is much more dangerous, and also being underweight is a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there is not a size for everybody. There is a size for everybody, but it isn't the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wondered, I also was rereading Hunger Strike recently. It's so brilliant and I guess upsetting to read because it is difficult to read about. But you argue that some of these treatment centres they treat the symptoms and not the cure. I just wondered if you thought it had got any better in terms of how
I'm always having
treated.
difficulty finding a treatment centre if I need to. And I still think mostly there is a denial of civil rights. And there's not enough, from my perspective, therapeutic work. I do totally accept the need to help somebody manage being refed. It's a really complicated issue. Mm-hmm. But they need to be refed psychologically as well.
Whenever I feel like I've seen a lot of documentaries about eating disorders suddenly, and they very rarely, it's very rarely viewed through a sort of feminist lens.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
It's really it's always left out of the documentary, and I always wonder why that is.
Well, I think the fact is that what is the statement? What is the protest about? Fifi was a manifesto of protest, so was Hunger Strike in a way. And what you can do is you can take a little piece of something from there and you can incorporate it into a wellness narrative or whatever you want. And hey presto, you've done away with patriarchy, which you of course haven't.
I've just got one last question, which I fear you've probably been asked a lot, but I just wondered what your thoughts are about why eating disorders have been on the rise, specifically in lockdown, and what that's been about.
I don't know that they have been on the rise in lockdown.
I think they read headlines, but
I know, but they're visible, aren't they?
Right,
they're visible to the person. Things reverberate on you during lockdown in a way that they don't in the rest of the time. Confinement ain't a good thing for any of us.
Yeah.
Obviously, for some people who are very isolated, it works, but for a lot of people. And if you haven't got much money, it's one thing you've got money, you can really actually use this as a time to understand your relationship to food. But I think it's a form of imprisonment. Personal imprisonment. The thing about lockdown is you actually have to imprison yourself.
Yeah.
That's the psychological job.
Yes, completely. Yeah.
Right? You've got to control yourself.
Yeah.
And one of the ways people are accustomed to doing that is eating, not eating, binging, having schemas. So I think that's more what's happened. And
like it's familiar almost, as like
and you're consuming your own. I mean, the forms of consumption which our culture has been about for the last 30 years have turned on the body, and so I think that may be some of the reasons.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's all my questions.